I thought we might pass a few interesting moments just to show you a few of the spoken word records from my many boxes of poetry recordings. This one's the poems of Francis Thompson, and as you can see it's read by Richard Gray and Mayo Lassay, and it's come from the library in Albany, New York. This is how a lot of these old records have survived, you know, from libraries that have collections have been sold off. This is probably this is early 60s, I think. That's the two readers. The first one. I'm just going to pick them out purely at random. Poetry 1900 to 1965. Poems by W.B. Yeats, Wilfred Owen, Louis MacNeice, Roy Fuller, Stevie Smith, Philip Larkin, Donald Davy, Peter Porter, Ted Hughes, Sylvia Plath, and they're read by Hugh Dixon, Harvey Hall, Francis Horowitz, Ted Hughes, Basil Jones, George Macbeth, Patrick McGee and Stevie Smith. That's the cover. A Longman's recording. See the track listings. Right, so Great Actors of the Past. It's a lovely album. This is put together from old Shellac Records. A collector lent his collection to Argo, and they compiled them onto this record back in the 60s. You've got Sarah Bernhardt, Edwin Booth, Beerholm Tree, Alexander Mossy, Julia Nielsen, Constant Conquelin, or is it Conquelin? Joseph Jefferson, Fred Terry, Lewis Waller, Tommaso Salvini and Cyril Maud. That's the selection of tracks on the record. Right, let's see what else I can find. These all seem to be Shakespeare records. So you've got this one here, which is William Shakespeare, 1564 to 1964. It's an Argo record. Argo released so many amazing spoken word records. Homage to Shakespeare, from his contemporaries and ours, devised and directed by George Rylands, recorded in association with the Shakespeare Exhibition 1964. About this record. The record has been planned to form a tribute to the memory of Shakespeare. I won't go on any more than that. So you've got artists taking part. Side one, the globe itself. It says in those days the globe hadn't been built. You know, they finished building the globe, I think somewhere around the 80s, towards the end of the 80s, and maybe early 90s even. Peggy Ashcroft, Alan Bates, Judi Dench, Edith Evans, John Gielgud, lots of greats of the acting profession reading from Shakespeare here. Peter McHenry, Laurence Olivier, Michael Redgrave, Vanessa Redgrave, Ralph Richardson, Paul Schofield, John Stride. There's hardly a great name of a theatre that didn't get involved with this record. Olivier. Scenes from Shakespeare, Hamlet and Henry the Fifth. There's another one. John Barrymore, another classic from old recordings, wax cylinder and 78 recordings put onto vinyl. That's Barrymore himself. Hamlet. Just turn it around that way. Quick look at the back. That's volume 2. This one. I don't think I've got volume 1. Speaking of Shakespeare's Verse by Ronald Watkins with Anne Marish and Peter Orr. Spoken Arts production. A lot of the Spoken Arts things are actually American reissues of Argo records, so I'm not sure if this is a British production or not. Scenes from Shakespeare 1. Excerpts from Henry V, Hamlet, Troilus and Cressida, and Richard III. The great Sir Donald Wolfett and Rosalind Eden. This one's one of those records that was originally produced to work with a slideshow. So you'd play the record, and it would give you little pings, and in order of sequence you'd follow the sequence and put up the relevant slide. I haven't got the slides, but this is Michelangelo. It's a really nice record actually. It's got some really nice readings on it. Odd Songs, Cyril Richard, and a poem. Wilfred Pickles, a very famous radio star in Britain. He was the first reader in on the BBC who didn't read the news in received pronunciation. You know, that sort of BBC English. He had a slight Yorkshire accent, and the idea was that the Nazis, you know, were trying to copy our broadcasts and give us all bad news in their own accent. Couldn't quite get their head around the Yorkshire accent, so yeah, that's how he became the first reader of news. He started off as a newsreader, and he became famous for his well, all sorts of performances and acting performances, etc. Eventually television, but he did radio shows as well about poetry, and he was a great lover of poetry. He published 2 or 3 compilations in book form as well. This is based upon his show, The Pleasures of Mine, classic radio show from the BBC. This is let's try this one out here. This is, I don't think this is very spoken word. This one. This is a bel canto disc. I got this in a collection of vocal artists, really, you know, classical vocal artists. It's just a nice record. It's quite a collector's item. Put that one over there. This one is female, reenactments of scenes from women's history, 1848 to 1920. So it's all the it's American heroines actually of history, basically. It's an American record. Side by side, you know, women's liberation. Certain Vincent van Gogh, performed by a Dutch performer who's absolutely brilliant. He did 1 record in Dutch and 1 in English, and these really are definitive readings of the diaries of Vincent van Gogh. That's the man himself. He played harmonica on some of the tracks as well. A very rare record, this one. It's Peter O'Shaughnessy poetry recordings from the London Library of Recorded English. Very hard record to find. I knew Peter O'Shaughnessy for about 3 months before he passed away. I got to know him on the phone a little bit. He had his number on the internet. I spoke to him in several conversations. He was an actor, an Australian actor. He spent much of his life in over in Britain, and he did lots of albums. He was a pioneer of recorded poetry and album on record. James N. Healy's Poetry of Cork and Kerry. That's the front cover. I've shown some of these before on previous videos, haven't I? I'll put that down there. This is Winston Churchill's daughter, Sarah Churchill. She was an actress, and this is an album recorded by Iago Records of her own poetry. And actually she wrote some pretty good poetry. She died quite young. She'd had problems with drink, and I think she died about age 65 or something, rather too young. But a talented lady, an actress, been lots of loads and loads of classic British movies, and she recorded this record, as I say. It's there she is, Churchill's daughter, Sarah Churchill. A Matter of Choice. Lovely, lovely album. Original poetry, and actually very good original poetry. Oh, there we go. Victorian poetry, really, isn't it? Arnold, Clough and Fitzgerald, read by Marius Goring, Ian Home and Derek Jacobi. Another one of those lovely Argo records. Keats. John Keats, or Junkets as some people call him. Another Argo record. Readings by Tony Church, Derek Godfrey, Richard Johnson, Margaret Scott and Gary Watson. Right, that's that one. Oh, Rudyard Kipling. There we are. Poems of Rudyard Kipling. Read by Michael Bates, Richard Johnson and Patrick Wymark. That's an Argo record as well. Argo produced so many amazing albums of poetry. This is World War II poetry. Will It Be So Again? Poetry and prose of the Second World War, read by Beatrix Lehman, Robert Hardy, who's only recently passed away, a fantastic actor, Robert Hardy, Ian Holm, another brilliant actor, Gary Watson, who was best known by a lot of people for his appearances in Doctor Who. Had a lovely voice. And he's still around. I think Gary Watson is still around. The last I heard of him is he may be in his 80s or 90s by now. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Wonderful poetry. Read by Tony Church, Frank Duncan, Dennis McCarthy, Margaret Scott, Gary Watson again. That's the other album of Tennyson on the Argo set. Tennyson Record 2. Lovely picture of Tennyson, isn't it? Lovely portrait of a young Tennyson. Frank Duncan, Michael Hordern and David King do the readings on this one. One of my old favourites, Bertrand Russell. I love his gentle films that he made with Woodrow Wyatt. He'd sit down and talk all sorts of different subjects. And what an interesting character he was. At a protest in Trafalgar Square, I think it was, a policeman was being a bit rough with him, and he said, "You better not be too rough with me, I'm very old, you know." Those various subjects, nuclear disarmament, etc. All the sort of things that, some of the things that are still in the news these days, and if only we could get that case in North Korea to disarm, it might take a lot of pressure off the world. Paradise Lost by Milton. Read by Anthony Quayle. That's just the inside's not that interesting, is it? That's the back of it. Benjamin Britten, Noise Flood, recorded at the Alderberg Festival. This is just, these are not really, that's slightly outside of my spoken word area, but voices, that's an interesting collection, a real sought after and difficult to find collection. I've got at least one collection of these records and maybe a few extra ones. Voices with all these classic covers on. Produced for schools mainly in Britain, for the school's curriculum, on Argo label. Has all sorts of performers on them, and it's can't quite read this writing in this light. My eyes are not good enough for this. I'll just do a quick scan. There we go. Right. Another one of the voices covers, the classic covers. Works of art in your own right. An anthology on 6 long-playing records of sounds, music and song presented in association with Penguin Education. The second book, Record 2. Argo Records. Sort of things we used to get played by our teachers at school in the 60s. Other voices. Another one of those classic covers. Oh, it's a very rare record. Lament on the Death of a Bullfighter. Federico Garcia Lorca. translated and read by Alan Wheatley. Alan Wheatley is, I think he was the Sheriff of Nottingham in the Richard Green Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest series, you know. Robin Hood, riding through the glen, or whatever it was, you know. But he could speak Spanish, and he translated all this himself and read these lovely poems. Here's another Garcia Lorca. Get him out of it. There we go. So this is a Spanish issue, or probably South American. Poeta en New York. Ignacio Sanchez Mijas. That was the bullfighter. He was Lorca's friend, and when he died, he was gored to death by the bull. Lorca wrote a poem about this bullfighter. An American record, so I'll just pull the cover off. Well, we can see through the cover anyway. It's a Caedmon record. Lovely records these, pretty good readings. Federico Colman, E. Cummings, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, Robert Graves, Langston Hughes, John Masefield. These are all readings by actors reading these famous poems. Once again, the writing's a bit small for me, but I don't know if you can work it out through this plastic. I've got most of the Jupiter records. They were produced by, just put that down for a second, Victor Clinton Badley. He came from Devon, and he was an actor, and he became very interested in poetry, and he set his own record company up, and recorded a lot of these in Ebury Street in Victoria, in a flat. It was a very sort of unusual block of flats, and he had a big flat in this block. It might have been the whole building actually. It's a very unusual building. You can look it up. Ebury Street. I'm not sure what the door number is. But anyway, it's one of the Jupiter records. This one, JUR00A3. This is ballads, so it's not poetry but ballads. William McGonagall, spoken and sung by Isla Cameron, Jill Balcon, Pauline Letts, John Laurie from Dad's Army, Ossian Ellis, and Victor Clinton Badley himself. Poetry of Milton. Anthony Quayle again. It's another Jupiter. Jupiter Anthology of 20th Century English Poetry. Poems by Thomas Hardy, Robert Bridges, A. Houseman, W.B. Yeats, Rudyard Kipling, W.H. Davies, Walter Delamere, John Masefield, Edward Thomas, D.H. Lawrence, James Elroy Flecker, Andrew Young, Siegfried Sassoon, Edwin Muir, and Edith Sitwell. Read by Jill Balcon, V.C. Clinton Badley, John Glenn, Cecil Day Lewis, Christopher Hassel, Carlton Hobbs, Stephen Murray, and Edith Sitwell reading her own poetry. Classic series of records. I've also got the 78s of a lot of these as well. A lot of these were issued, I think, originally in the 50s, late 50s, on 78 records. And Tam O'Shanter and Other Poems, Robert Burns. Scottish records, this label. Read by Harold Whiteman. Tam O'Shanter, Uta Hagen, Willie Wessel Dwelt on Tweed. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Addressed to the toothpaste. Addressed to the toothache. To a louse. Holy Willie's Prayer. Epistle to Major Logan. To the Uncle Guide. Holy Willie's Epitaph. To James Smith. Epistle to Dr. Blacklock. There we go. Spoken Burns, Scottish records. Acord Street, Aberdeen, Scotland. I think this is that's it, William Wordsworth. Another lovely Iago record. It's a series from Chaucer to Yeats. It was a series on the great poets, included Tennyson as well. Can't quite read that text again, I'm struggling. Oh, here we go. It's a prelude, excerpts read by Peter Orr and William Squire. I've done a video on all these patterns of poetry, and I've got the complete series. I've got several collections of the pattern of poetry. One of my all-time favourite poetry record collections. Just beautiful readings. More Burns. Tom Fleming this time, reading the poetry. More Burns poems, Cotter's Saturday Night to a Mouse, Death and Dr. Hornbrook. My love is like a red, red rose, a fond kiss, lass that made the bed to me, Willie brewed a peck of mort, landlady, count the lawn, Scotch drink, green grow the rashes, elegy to Robert Rousseau. Lovely picture of Burns on the front. That's Tom Fleming. Scottish Records again, at 52 Bon Accord Street, Aberdeen, Scotland. Let's go past those. Le Morte Arthur, Lancelot and Guinevere, read by there we go, lovely cover, isn't it? Thomas Mallory. Caedmon record. Paul Gray's Golden Treasury, Claire Bloom, Eric Portman, John Neville. These are absolutely beautiful readings. Some real definitive readings here. Let's put that one down. Pretty much the same on both sides, and let's have a quick look on the inside. So you've got Shakespeare, you've got Cranshaw, Don, Herrick, Wyatt. They Flee From Me by Eric Portman. It's a beautiful reading. They flee from me that sometimes seek me here. You've got Gray, On a Favourite Cat, Drowned in a Tub of Goldfish by Eric Portman again, read by Eric Portman. Burns, My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose, read by John Neville. Claire Bloom reading A Slumber Did My Spirits Seal by Wordsworth. Absolutely definitive readings. Such a beautiful couple of records that, and that's a double record set. Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. Neville Coghill, Norman Davis, John Burrow. Another one of these lovely Iago records. Now, what else have we got there? Because I've got a few things that aren't necessarily spoken word here, because this is one of the boxes that I've mixed stuff together in. Another Iago record. Peter Redgrove and Peter Porter, two famous poets of the 60s. Poetry for Pleasure, that's a lovely set of, I think it's 3 records. It's all classic poems. This is interesting. Trouble is with this record is it's all Russian. This is on the Soviet Union days, you know, that funny label they used to do lots of records on. So this was sent to me from a chap in Lithuania, and it sounds like really good readings. I'm not sure if it's political propaganda or poetry, because I can't understand Russian, but I thought it was interesting to have. It was only about £8. My interests vary as well, like musical as well. You know I love monologues, you can tell from my 78 collection. Iliad and Odyssey, read by Ennis Rees, by Homer. Spoken Arts, quite a rare record to find. There we are, Ennis Rees, an American academic. Robinson Crusoe. extracts from his journal read by the great Ian Richardson, forever famous for House of Cards, the original series, and many other things. He was such a brilliant actor, such a lovely voice. There we are. Let's see what else I can find. I'm not sure what it is, I can't read it from here. Oh, this lady, like she was a Lancashire dialect poet, Louisa Bierman. That's the lady there. Curtain, a wedding, I can't really guess that pronunciation, a winning cup, silver wedding, Michelli cake. Not a very good Lancashire accent, is it? So, right, question to take. Fiddler on the Roof, one of those shows I really love. Oh look, Max Miller, look, what a lovely photograph. Poor old Max is getting on a bit in this photograph. It's one of his later records. A golden guinea product. Max at the Met, one of his great recordings. Tribute to Scotland. So a lot of Robert Burns stuff. These are songs, I think. I got to pick this one up in a charity shop. Jim MacLeod's Welcome to Scotland. Grand March, Highland Reel, you can see all the different things there. Two-step, Johnny Beggar. Must be a bit of Burns in there somewhere. Let's have a look. Anyway, it's kind of 60s folk, you know, Scottish folk sound of music. Just one I picked up in a charity shop in a collection. Another Milton record at Paradise Lost, read by Anthony Quayle. These are just, as I say, I've mixed them together, so you've got various things. There's another one of those amazing Russian records that I bought in a collection of classical. I bought all the vocal stuff. I don't know much about classical music, so I bought all the vocal stuff because I do love vocal, you know, really good quality singers. This is, I think this is a highly collectible record. One day I'll probably put it up on eBay. What we got here now? Oh, Richard Baker. He was a newsreader and got all sorts of. Oh, what he was doing was introducing his favourites on that record. Daniel Farson presents Billy Danvers, Hetty King, Mari Lloyd, Ida Barr. It's had all these lovely, I don't know if there were reissues of the old 78s. Mari Lloyd Jr. this was. Oh, yeah, A Long Way to Tipperary. I must get these out and play them for you sometime on video. That's something like Complete Sessions. I think that was something like Ragtime Music or something. That's just something I picked up in the collection with a lot of other records. So you've got Tennyson. This is Dame Sybil Thorndike. Another one of those lovely treasuries, Palgrave's Treasury of Poetry, based upon the book. That's only one of the boxes, so I've got many more records. I've got hundreds of records of spoken word poetry. That's just one box I thought I'd show you, so I hope you enjoyed, and I didn't detain too much of your time. I hope you enjoyed this little look at some of the collection.